وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So this is the third and final class, inshallah ta'ala, discussing this topic, the three questions of the grave. And the first question was, who's your Lord? Thank you for being awake. And the second question was, what is your deen? And the third question, which we'll discuss today, is, Naam, who is this man who was sent amongst you? Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we briefly said that the greatest obligation that we have towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Sorry? Okay, that he be given his right. That he be given his right of worship and of tawheed. Okay? And the greatest crime against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to commit the opposite of tawheed, to worship other than Allah, or to give anyone else an attribute that is only worthy for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the definition of shirk. Yeah, that you give someone other than Allah an attribute or a quality or a right that belongs only to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Islam, as a definition, we said is what? How can we define Islam?
From the root of Islam.
Good, which is? To submit. And so Islam is submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And we said, we added submitting to Allah ta'ala inwardly and outwardly. And that's just a sort of textbook definition. The 5 pillars of Islam are, brother?
Shahada.
Good. Second one?
Salah.
Salah.
Fasting.
Okay, before that?
Hajj and...
So, Shahada, and then Salah.
Zakat.
Good. And then?
Oh, fasting.
Okay, fasting in Ramadan, and then?
Hajj.
Good, performing of Hajj, and these are 5. The 5 pillars of Islam. The 4 pillars of Islam stand upon the first one, of course, which is the main one, the Shahada, testifying that there is no true God but Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His messenger. And Salah, of course, is the greatest of the pillars after the Shahada. Talking of that, inshallah, for the upcoming classes, some of the brothers suggested numerous different topics on what we can cover after, and perhaps it would be good if people can write their suggestions as to what topics they feel are worth covering for future lessons. Okay, so that's the 2 weeks upcoming, 2 upcoming weeks inshallah, and then after the Christmas holiday. Or the winter holiday, if the word Christmas makes you shiver. So, so some of the topics suggested were discussing the ahadith of Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah, the 40 ahadith of al-Nawawi. Okay, we wouldn't cover the whole book because it would require a bit more time. So chosen ahadith from this book, or the fiqh of purification and salah. Okay. Or the foundations of fiqh. The foundations of fiqh. What fiqh means, what it means to study fiqh, what the madhahib of fiqh are, what's a madhab, what's following a school of jurisprudence of fiqh. Okay, how did fiqh come about? Yeah, how did Islamic law, fiqh is Islamic law, halal and haram, etc. How did it come about in the first place? Why there are differences of opinion between the scholars, even though we only have one messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So these are types of questions that relate to the foundations of fiqh. Okay, it's a topic obviously worth discussing. But anyhow, you're welcome to write down your suggestions. Do we have paper? Yeah. So you're welcome to write down your suggestions, or give it some thought, and then speak to the brothers and sisters involved in charge. Okay, so they're the 5 pillars of Islam, and we have the 6 pillars of Iman. The first pillar is belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the second pillar is good, belief in the angels.
Books.
Okay, good. Books, belief in the books. Behind?
Prophets.
Belief in the prophets. Sister?
In the destiny, the code of Allah.
And before that?
In the unseen.
All of them are unseen. Belief in the Day of Judgment, and then belief in Qadr. Okay, good. So they're the 6 pillars of Iman. And remember we said, what's necessary is to believe in these things. Al-Iman al-Mujmal. Yeah, general Iman. And that's why if a person was to say, for instance, I don't know so-and-so from the angels, or I don't know who Dawood is. So I don't know who the Prophet Dawood is, never heard of him. His Iman is still complete. Okay, his Iman is complete. However, this is one thing I didn't mention last week. Something that is clear-cut in the religion, if a person comes to know it, then belief in it becomes wajib. Okay, belief in it becomes obligatory if it's something that is zahir, clear, apparent. For instance, I used the example of Jibreel alayhi salam last week. If someone says from the lay people, or any person, any Muslim says, to be honest, I've never heard of Jibreel. Yeah, don't know who Jibreel is. We say, طيب, so long as you have belief in the angels, your Iman is valid. But if it is explained to him who Jibreel is, and the verses of the Quran that talk about Jibreel, and the ahadith that discuss Jibreel, now belief in Jibreel for him is wajib. And rejecting the belief in Jibreel would be kufr. Because it's a belief that is zahir, it's apparent, it's clear, it's agreed upon, and it's clearly mentioned in the texts. Okay? Other things are not so clear. Other things are not so clear. So even if something is explained to you, the average Muslim is not required to have an opinion on certain issues. Yeah? For instance, if it is said to a person, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descend in the final part of the night? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descend, come down in the final part of the night? As the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said in a hadith. And he says, I don't know. And it's said to him, well, the Prophet ﷺ says so and so. Here are the ahadith that discuss this issue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends in the final part of the night, every night, and says, is there anyone who's seeking forgiveness so I can forgive him? Anyone who has a request so that I can answer him, etc., etc. And he still says, I don't know. I don't know whether this is supposed to be literal or not literal. His Iman is complete. And this means that for a person to have an opinion on this type of issue is not wajib. It is not wajib. Really, it's a scholarly debate. Yeah? It's a scholarly discussion. Some things are purely academic. It's not necessary for every Muslim to have a view on it. Some people think that if they don't have an opinion on something, then they're going to Jahannam. That's not how things work. Okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religion is one that is simple and clear. Those things that are clear and simple in the deen are obligatory for us to follow. Those things that aren't so clear and maybe are more academic, then that doesn't mean there's no correct opinion, doesn't mean there's no right or wrong answer. But is the average Muslim responsible for finding everything out about these things? The answer is no. طيب, so the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam is Muhammad ibn who? The son of who?
Abdullah.
Ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim ibn Abdul Manaf. Good. Ibn Qusay ibn Kilab ibn Murrah ibn Ka'b ibn Lu'ay ibn Ghalib ibn Fihr ibn Malik ibn Nadr ibn Kinanah ibn Khuzaymah ibn Mudrikah ibn Yas ibn Mudar ibn Nizar ibn Ma'ad ibn Adnan. And up to Adnan, his name is agreed upon by the scholars. The scholars agree that his name is this that I've just mentioned to you, about 22 names. Okay, Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Adnan, all the way up to Adnan. Then there are suggestions as to what his nasab is. His nasab ish. What's the English? Lineage. Good, lineage. Then there's a difference over what his lineage is up to Adam alayhi salam, up to Ibrahim, and then up to Adam alayhi salam. Okay, but of course he's the son of Ibrahim. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the grandson of Ibrahim. That's him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he was known for his character and his nobility and his truthfulness and honesty before he came with the message of Islam. And in that is a massive indicator for those who want to be teachers and those who want to give da'wah, etc. A person can't just jump out of the blue and give da'wah. It doesn't work like that. Because a person's opinion won't be accepted in that manner. And this is important. Sometimes you see something that's wrong, or you think that something is worth talking about, but no one knows who you are. And so nobody's really going to take seriously what you have to say. And that's a reality. Sometimes, and if people are requesting advice from you, then they're now sort of mentally prepared to receive advice. If someone comes requesting advice from you, or trusts your advice, then they're mentally prepared to take it on board. Yeah? But if you're someone who isn't known to the person on the receiving end of the advice, and you're only going to bring about hostility, okay, or you're known with bad manners, even worse, you're known to have bad manners and you're known to be a troublemaker, and then you want to come and give da'wah and teach, then there's a problem there. So notice how the Prophet ﷺ established himself as a well-mannered, respectable person first. Only at the age of 40 was revelation then sent to him. Yeah, and that's one key thing. How long did he spend in Mecca? Well, firstly, where's he from? Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Which city? Tayyib, Mecca. And he spent how long in Mecca after prophethood? 13 years. So he was a prophet at the age of 40, and he spent 13 years in Mecca. And he died at the age of 63. And so because of that, that means how many years did he spend in Medina? 10 years in Medina. So 13 years in Mecca, 10 years in Medina. What was the focus of his teaching in Mecca?
Day of Judgment.
Belief in the Day of Judgment, the usul faith, the usul of the religion, the usul of the deen. The Prophet ﷺ taught his companions in an amazing way. And when he taught his companions, radiallahu anhum, he really transformed them. They became special people. It wasn't a sort of wishy-washy type of thing. They really became special. And that's for a number of reasons. Firstly, because he prioritized teaching them appropriately. As we can see, in Mecca he focused on Iman, yeah? He focused on Iman. Then in Medina the laws started to come down. The prohibition of alcohol only came down later on. The obligation of the hijab only came down later on. The obligation of salah was established later on, in the 10th year after prophethood. So only a few years before the hijrah. Fasting was only established in Medina, fasting of Ramadan. Yeah? And so see how these laws and obligations, even though they're from the pillars of Islam, only came after people's faith established. Now, this was as Islam was being spread. So today there is no scope for saying, for you, salah isn't wajib, don't worry about it. Alright, I'll give you 10 years time, get ready, learn about Islam and so on. After 10 years time, inshallah, you can start praying. No, because we're not legislators. Okay, we're not legislators. However, what do you begin with when teaching Islam? What do you begin with when giving da'wah? That is where this comes in useful. Yeah, this is where this comes in useful. How is it that a new Muslim can be told about all the deviant masajid in Birmingham before he knows how to pray? He doesn't know what a masjid is first, doesn't know what prayer is first, and you've introduced him to all the different masajid and said, this one don't pray at this one, pray at this one are 40% on the path, this one are off the path completely, this one are disbelievers, you might as well pray behind Jews, this one is... And he's introduced him to all this type of, rubbish in reality, before he knows his faith properly in the first place. That's very, very incorrect, very problematic. Yeah? And I think I've emphasized this in each lesson that we've had so far. Prioritizing knowledge. Yeah? This is called maratib al-ahkam. Knowing the status of a ruling, knowing its position. Yeah? If somebody has not prayed his whole life, then it's not really a priority to get them to stop listening to music. That's not a priority for now. Priority for now, does that mean for them music is halal? No, it doesn't mean that. Does it mean that for them having a girlfriend is or a boyfriend is halal? No, it doesn't mean that. But does it mean that we first focus on what's more appropriate for them? Yes. That's where this comes in. Yeah. So because of this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people developed into real firm believers to the extent that one of the companions says, "O Messenger of Allah, should I fight first and then say the shahada?" Can you believe this? Hasn't even said the shahada yet. Should I fight first? Fight means physically fight to defend Islam. Fight with the Muslims. Should I fight first and then say the shahada? Or should I accept Islam first and then fight? And he said to him, Aslim, first accept Islam and then perform jihad. So, how convincing was the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ for someone to say that type of thing? Astonishing. Alayhi salatu wassalam. And he was someone who was genuinely concerned about his people. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes him. And this verse is really the description of the Messenger alayhi salatu wassalam. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. A messenger has come to you from amongst yourselves. Yeah, from amongst yourselves. عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. Meaning, hardships, he finds it difficult. He finds hardships upon you difficult upon himself. He doesn't like to see you in hardships. عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. Very concerned for you. بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ رَؤُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. And he is kind and merciful with the believers. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And this is in Surah At-Tawbah. Yeah? And the first part of the verse, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. A messenger has come to you from amongst yourselves. From amongst yourselves. This shows that the people who really are going to influence are those who are from the community itself. Those who are from the community itself. And let's use the example of da'wah and teaching. The most influential teachers are going to be local teachers and local imams and local scholars. They're the main references. Although guest speakers bring more audiences and guest speakers bring about more advertising and guest speakers bring about more excitement, but the reality is that proper da'wah and proper development comes from within. Yeah, it comes from within. And that's why it's essential for us to be involved in sort of local learning and local studying with local teachers and because then you're not just learning the theoretical side of Islam, but you're learning its proper application. Okay, you're learning its proper application. طيب. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about him, Azizun alayhi ma anittum, it upsets him that you go through hardships. Harisun alaykum. He's really concerned for you. And in another verse in Surah Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, فَلَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعُ نَفْسَكَ عَلَى آثَارِهِمْ إِن لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهَذَا الْحَدِيثِ أَسَفًا. Perhaps you're going to end up killing yourself from sadness and upset and disappointment because they don't accept this Quran from you. So when some people refused the message of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is Islam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was really affected by that and upset by that and concerned for that. Okay, so when he was teaching, he taught as a person who was concerned and genuine, and this really needs to be the case. And one of the conditions of giving advice and teaching and commanding the good and forbidding the evil, one of its conditions is what? Is genuine concern. As for commanding the good and forbidding the evil with the intention of boasting, or the intention of belittling the other person, or the intention of proving the other person wrong, then that's a problem. Yeah? And I see this almost every day at the school that I teach at. The kids, mashallah, are using the Quranic verses, but they're using them to wage war against each other. They use them to wage war against each other. So, don't say that. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. MashaAllah, now the verses of the Quran have come out. And that's not sincere advice. And that's not proper commanding good and forbidding the evil. The Prophet ﷺ was seriously concerned for his ummah and people in general. And Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, who thinks he's upon the truth and is not upon the truth, then guide him to the truth. Genuine dua and genuine concern. طيب. When the scholars of tafsir discuss this verse of Surah At-Tawbah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about him, Azizun alayhi ma anittum, hardship is something that harms him. He doesn't like to see hardship upon you. And that was the nature of him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, a very relaxed person and a laid-back individual, and not a person who wanted difficulty for people. And when a man came to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and said to him, Ya Rasulullah, arayta idha sallaytu al-maktubat, if I pray the 5 times, the 5 prayers, and I fast Ramadan, sumtu Ramadan, etc., etc., wa ahlaltu al-halal wa haramtu al-haram, and I don't do anything else, will I enter Jannah? Qala na'am. He said, yes, you'll enter Jannah inshallah, if you just pray the 5 prayers and do this and do that. And the man who came to him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he had sexual intercourse with his wife during Ramadan, which is a major sin. To have sexual intercourse in the day of Ramadan is a major sin. And it invalidates the fast, and it requires an expiation of fasting 2 consecutive, freeing a slave, or fasting 2 consecutive months. And if not, then feeding 60 poor people. And if not, then there's nothing upon you. So the Prophet ﷺ, when this man came to him, he said to him, Tayyib, do you find a slave that you could free? He said, no. He said, can you fast 60 consecutive days? He said, oh Messenger of Allah, I'm in this problem because of fasting. How can I go and fast 60 consecutive days? So the Prophet ﷺ said to him, can you find something to feed 60 poor people with? And the man said, oh Messenger of Allah, between these 2 mountains, there's no family poorer than me. So who am I going to give money to or food to? So after some time, the Prophet ﷺ had some dates brought to him. So he gave it to the man and said, hand this out to the poor. So he said, hand it out to someone poorer than me. So the Prophet ﷺ smiled and said, feed it to your family. Okay. So you imagine this person comes having committed a major sin. He's supposed to be freeing a slave, or fasting 2 consecutive months, or feeding 64 people, and ends up with a gift. Okay, ends up with a gift and feeds his own family. And what does the Prophet ﷺ do? He just smiles at the person. Not be difficult with him or harsh with him. And that's how he was, alayhi salatu wassalam. And to be honest, if this was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Muslims had the Messenger ﷺ in front of him, living with him, and you were living amongst Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali, and you're living amongst Zayd ibn Thabit and Mu'adh ibn Jabal, what type of iman are you going to be in if you're living? Imagine you're living in a city with all these individuals. What type of iman are you going to be in all the time? Just seeing Zayd ibn Thabit is like reciting the whole Quran in terms of increasing iman. And still, the Prophet ﷺ was easy with those who needed ease and gentleness, etc. That's even more so the case in our time. It really is even more so the case in our time. If ever we need ease and gentleness, then we need it in our time more. Now, just as we have obligations towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, firstly, are there any questions or anything anyone wants to raise about what's been covered so far? We won't take too much longer, inshallah. Now, our duty towards the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is there, just as our duty towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there, and our duty towards people are there. And in the hadith of Sahih Muslim, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Ad-dinu an-nasiha." The religion is nasiha. قُلْنَا لِمَنْ? They said, nasiha to who? Okay, what's nasiha? Nasiha to who? No. Then he said, nasiha for Allah, lillahi, wa li kitabihi, and to his book, wa li rasulihi, wa li a'immatil muslimina wa ammatihi, and the leaders of the Muslims and the general Muslims. So we need to have nasiha towards these different categories. And nasiha towards these categories means fulfilling their right. Okay, it doesn't mean just giving advice, because there's no meaning to giving advice to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the sense that we understand advice. And there's no way a person give advice to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in particular those who come after him. And also advice towards his book, the Quran, is meaningless also. And so what is meant by nasiha here is giving each their right. And the first right of the Prophet ﷺ is that he be loved and obeyed, and that we know that he is a legislator. As far as we are concerned, the Prophet ﷺ's words and actions are a guideline for us. And we've said before, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends messengers. Why doesn't Allah ta'ala suffice with books? Why don't the books suffice? Even though books remain amongst us and messengers pass away.
Would be too long.
Sorry?
The book would be too large to encapsulate everything that was
Okay, fine. Book might get too long.
It has to be explained.
Good. A book will need some explanation, because there's a massive difference between theory and between practice, isn't there? Okay, so the prophets are there to implement that. Okay, good. What else?
We learn values and characteristics by engaging with people.
Okay, good. A real life element to teachings and guidelines is brought about when we have a prophet, when we have a person to follow. Yeah, we have a person to follow, and this is important. Islam cannot be acted upon as law. We're not living in a court case. That's not how Islam works. Yeah. طيب, anything else? Yeah, good. Generally speaking, that is the main purpose of having messengers. They are real life implementations and real life examples of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's teachings and guidance for us as human beings. And our duty is to obey the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And obeying Allah ta'ala can only be valid if we obey the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. مَن يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ. The one who obeys the Messenger has obeyed Allah, as Allah ta'ala says in the Quran. The one who obeys the Messenger has obeyed Allah. And in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا كَانَ لِمُؤْمِنٍ وَلَا مُؤْمِنَةٍ إِذَا قَضَى اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ أَمْرًا أَن يَكُونَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ. And it is not for a believer, if Allah or His Messenger have ruled on an issue, that they have the choice for themselves. And in another verse, Allah Ta'ala says in Surah An-Nisa, فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. By your Lord, they will not truly believe, حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِيمَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُم. Until they make you, O Muhammad, judge between anything they disputed. Is that it? Or is there more? ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُوا فِي صُدُورِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا فَلَا وَرَبِّكَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ حَتَّى يُحَكِّمُوكَ فِيمَا شَجَرَ بَيْنَهُمْ ثُمَّ لَا يَجِدُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَرَجًا مِمَّا قَضَيْتَ وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا. And then once they make you judge over anything they dispute and they don't find in their hearts any issue, they don't find in their hearts any sort of discomfort, وَيُسَلِّمُوا تَسْلِيمًا, and they completely submit to your command and your judgment. And this is really important. And to obey the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is from the pillars of the deen, and it's an obligation. It is like obeying Allah Ta'ala. We said previously that some rulings in Islam have clear wisdoms behind them, yeah? And other rulings in Islam may not have such clear wisdoms. Our obligation with submission is in relation to both. Those rulings that clearly have wisdoms, and those rulings that might not be so clear to us. So the wisdom behind not killing an innocent soul is quite obvious, isn't it? Okay? No Muslim is going to be confused about this ruling and think, oh, I wonder why it's, prohibited in Islam to kill innocent people. I want to know what the reasoning behind that is. No one's going to ask that type of question, because it's something that all of humanity agrees to. It's common sense, okay? It's accepted by every person. But there are other rulings that are not so clear in terms of wisdom. and maybe require an explanation. Or maybe people feel like they need an explanation. Or maybe even more than that, maybe it opposes what we've been brought up with. And it opposes the generally accepted views of society. Nonetheless, submission is required in both cases. Because the creator who legislated this is the same creator who legislated that. And one of the mistakes that we don't want to fall into is to be happy when a ruling goes in our favor. Yeah? When a ruling goes in our favor, it suits the things that we want. We become, great fans of these hadith that support us, and we always are posting them on our social media accounts and reminding people of these hadith and saying, come on, yeah, the Prophet ﷺ said this, you can't go against the Prophet ﷺ. Yeah, the hadith are there. But then when we have some hadith that don't quite go in accordance with what we were hoping, then we don't like it. Okay, we become upset. We have to remember, the same person who said this is the same person who said this. Does it mean everything's easy? No. Does it mean everything's easy to accept in the heart? No, it isn't. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالُ وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. Fighting has been legislated for you, even though you dislike it. Even though you dislike it and you hate it. Because no one wants to put their life and their wealth at risk. وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It might be that you dislike something that's good for you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. And it may be that you like something that is harmful for you, that isn't good for you. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And Allah knows, and you don't. And that's the meaning of submission. Okay, that's the meaning of submission. So we cannot be unreasonable and expect every person to be completely at ease with every ruling. That's not the obligation in Islam. If that was the obligation in Islam, then Allah Ta'ala would have criticized the Sahaba for finding some difficulty with fighting. Yeah? That would have been criticized. But it wasn't criticized. All that was said was, it may be that you don't like some things that are good for you. And it may be that you like some things that aren't good for you. And Allah knows, and you do not. Yeah? And that's important. Okay, that's important in particular with things that oppose established values that we're used to. Yeah? For instance, we're brought up in the UK or the Western world in general with certain values. With certain values that are accepted by every person. Certain understanding of religion, certain understanding of faith, certain understanding of gender, okay, and the roles of the genders, etc., etc. And when we accept those values and get used to them, then we find that Islam teaches something slightly different. It can come as something difficult to accept in the first, initially. But the concept of submission is essential to be remembered. So the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam needs to be put above every person when it comes to that. And also to have genuine love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is important. And loving the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and following him are two different things. Yeah? Two different things. Why do I say this? Because some people say true love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is to follow him. But they might outwardly follow some of the apparent practices of the Sunnah, but within them they don't really have a genuine love for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And for some of such people who might be aggressive when it comes to certain practices of the Sunnah, doesn't find genuine love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's a mistake. There's no good being aggressive about a certain Sunnah with other people. And then when the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam's name is mentioned 100 times in your presence, you don't say sallallahu alaihi wasallam a single time. Okay? You don't say sallallahu alaihi wasallam a single time. Or you find saying sallallahu alaihi wasallam too much. You can say hundreds and thousands of other words, but when it comes to this, no, that's too much. Just, keep it short. Sign. Yeah? Instead of sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, writing it, Saad, is one thing. But to say sign, or to say sell, or something like that, then, that seems to be perhaps lazy or a lack of etiquette. And the scholars some scholars went as far as saying that it's wajib to say sallallahu alayhi wasallam every time the name of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam is mentioned. Although it's a minority opinion, and the majority, the vast majority of scholars say it is recommended to say sallallahu alayhi wasallam each time his name is mentioned, alayhi salatu wassalam. So yeah, they're two different things. Yes, the sign of genuine and valid love of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that you also obey him and follow him. Yes, that's a fruit. Okay, that's a sign and that's a proof that this love and respect for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is valid and sincere. Person can't claim love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and oppose him. There's an invalid claim here. Yeah, there's an invalid claim here. But does that mean that just outwardly doing certain actions is sufficient? No, it isn't sufficient. It is not sufficient. Yeah. And I mean, as you all know, the volumes and volumes have been written about the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's really important to study his seerah, to read a book about him, alayhi salatu wassalam, to follow classes, okay, about his seerah, also his shama'il, how he was, okay, how he was as a person, his appearance, his interaction with other people, and so on and so forth. It really, really is important. It really is important. And there's no way a person can know the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and not increase in more iman. No way. And there's no way that someone can really know who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is and not be more and more convinced that this message is the message that's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our religion is amazing. It's an amazing religion. It cannot be compared to any other way of life. Yeah, really. Islam cannot be compared to any other way of life. Regardless of discussions that we have about, okay, faiths and interfaith and getting to know other religions, etc. No problem, that's all great, that's nice. But nothing compares to Islam. Really, nothing compares to Islam and how complete it is, how encompassing it is, how it's covered every single thing. Everything. And one of the people tried to mock Islam by saying to Salman al-Farisi radiallahu anhu, your religion has spoken about everything, even how to use the toilet. Yeah? Your religion's taught you everything, even how to use the toilet. So Salman al-Farisi radiallahu anhu said, yes, our religion's taught us everything, and it's taught us to make istinja after using the bathroom, etc., etc. No, that's not something to be upset about or embarrassed about. That's a massive blessing. That's a massive blessing. That we've been guided in every single thing that we do. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And we'll leave it at that, inshallah.